Oh my gosh, Tanya, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm so happy you've reached out to us because Tanya sent me this email, guys, and it was like, I'm a big fan of the show. FYI, you haven't talked about accountability groups and goal prioritization in about 6 months, just a heads up. And I was like, that is correct. You are absolutely right on that. We should probably have you on the show. And we don't say yes to everybody that reaches out to us, but after doing my background research and all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, we absolutely want to have you on the show. And I know you have different methods that address those things, but you kind of came to those because of your unique, crazy journey into this world of solopreneurs. Can you tell our audience about that journey? Because it really just blew my mind, everything you went through.
Yeah, I started my first company at 25. And I come from an immigrant family, Colombian, and we have no clue. There was no such thing as like, hey, be an entrepreneur. It was more of like, go do the safety route. And it's not safe, right? Like go corporate, be a doctor, be a lawyer, whatever safety means in back then for an immigrant. And I decided, I was like, I went through the whole startup phase and I was like, should I do this? Should I start my own thing? And she's like, my mother was like, yeah, why wouldn't you do it? And I said, well, what happens if I fail? And she goes, you'll be exactly where you are now, working for someone. And I go, well, what happens if they don't hire me? And then she goes, well, you wouldn't want to work for a company like that. So I went for it. I had nothing to lose. And I think most people really don't have anything to lose. And they should just go for it.
Yes, absolutely. So you talk about, what a great mom, by the way, for encouraging you to keep going. But you're a real go-getter and you have a great way of prioritizing business, but also prioritizing your personal life and setting real goals in your personal life. So I want people to have an understanding of the types of things you reach for in business, but the types of things you've also reached for personally, all while having like a health battle as well, if I'm not mistaken. So can you dive into that a little bit? I just want people to see like you can do it and your story is very inspirational. And then from there, we'll get into all of your advice and all that stuff.
Yeah, of course. So I have a rare bone disease called osteogenesis imperfecta. And it's in a spectrum. I'm in the really good side of the spectrum where some kids start breaking bones in the womb and then die within weeks. And then there's others like my oldest sister she's broken so many bones, all bones and probably 3 or 4 times and has been a wheelchair user since she was little, right? So that's the level. I found out I had it right after I completed, it was one of my big races, either Boston or 70.3 Ironman, one of those things where I had no clue until I fractured my hip and they're like, yeah, you have this thing. But I kept going and doing more sports. And I think it's helped me to be who I am today, right? So there's a number of things I've gone and, coming from that growth mindset early on, my family put that on me. So I had no clue in the sense of like what there was any limitations. All I thought was possibilities.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, and you, because of all of this, and you said you did Boston, you're like one of my big races, like you do these all the time, which to me, if you do Boston, but because you've had some adversity and some obstacles and challenges, your mission is now to help others like crush their work life, but also their personal life. And you say that you do this primarily through goal prioritization. And I just want to know, like, how can people navigate through the distractions that are just everywhere these days? And if they seemingly have these obstacles, what advice do you have from a goal setting standpoint?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring you back to my first company when I was 25. I was pretty naive and I wanted to travel the world. So when I was building this company and I grew it to over 1 million within the first year, during that whole journey, I've traveled over, I think, 42, 43 countries. But why I say I was naive is because I was like, I want to travel. And this is like before, this is in the early 2000s where like, it wasn't a big thing being an entrepreneur, traveling, there was an internet connection as well. And I would book a trip for 2 weeks every quarter. And that would force me to be really resourceful. So what I mean by that is I had to hire a team to make sure that the company would survive without me. I had to trust that I had the systems in place for the team to, like, it could work. Like sometimes I was hiking Machu Picchu in Peru, or I was in Cuba, No internet connection. So if things went down, my team need to handle it. And what that helped me do, it helped me really prioritize things. So I think that most people, when they start going into entrepreneurship, they're like, I have so much time. And then they have put so many things on their plate. But when you actually have time constraints and you narrow down your focus, you get a lot done. You become really resourceful. Because now it's like, okay, well, I have this much time to make sure my team can do this. All right, got to get everything done. And that's how I was able to travel and then build my company very quickly. And back then, it wasn't as popular like to have remote workers. Right now, it's like popular to get a virtual assistant in the Philippines. You go to Upwork, all these places. But I was like, I have an office in New York City. And how the heck am I going to afford a New York salary for these, for all these people that I would hire? That's pretty pricey. New York is one of the most expensive. So what I did is I found people in Colombia. And I had a CTO. I had all these people that I was bringing on. And then I had only 2 or 3 people in New York.
And the one thing I really want to clarify with our audience is you said team, you said workers. This can be contractors. So everybody that's listening right now, they're solopreneurs. Joe, I would consider us a good team, right? I think we're a team, but I am not an employee of Joe's. I contract with Lifestar and I do marketing services for Lifestar, but I'm not an employee. And so I just really want to, a team doesn't necessarily mean you're an employee or you work 40 hours a week and all that. It's the people you decide to work with, and it can absolutely be a contractor basis. And we actually encourage solopreneurs to form those quote unquote contractor teams. So just for clarification's sake.
I think that's really great. And it also, anybody who's starting the solopreneur journey, I will say the first thing I really, really advise somebody is to hire a virtual assistant as soon as possible. And I think most people don't realize that they're anywhere from $4 to $6 an hour.
Yeah, depending. And it's funny because we've had people on here because you can definitely get a VA that's out of the States. And then if you want somebody that's in the States, sometimes you have to pay a little bit more, but it just kind of depends. Like if you need somebody that's on your time zone, that's there's so many things to figure out, but we've heard so many people share that same sentiment. So I want to ask a question and in regards to so setting your goals, when you say oh, I have these ideas and I want to travel and I have a team in place, sometimes in order to get all of your ducks in a row in your processes, you need to be super productive in a short amount of time to hit these goals and to delegate and everything. So do you have if somebody's I want to go to Machu Picchu, I need to hire somebody, what are ways that people can really hone in and get their to-do list done so that they can accomplish these goals, whether it's training for Boston, whether it's traveling or whatever?
That's a great question. So sometimes people think of these huge goals. It's kind of like running a marathon if you've never ran a marathon. And then you just get excited, you sign up, and then you're like, what the F? What did I get myself into? And then you start looking at this huge schedule and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? But the first thing you need to do is do it bite size, small little steps, little by little. Now, how to focus that goal? I would narrow it down. I think a lot of people make the mistake that they don't do goals based on their values, right? They're doing it based on maybe what they see outside, especially in this social media world, right? So you got to figure out what really aligns to you, because entrepreneurship or any goal it could be hard. Anyone who tells you the journey's like this is BS. It's really a roller coaster. And most of the time you're going through this roller coaster and sometimes it's going up, but you don't even realize it because you're going down a little and that down feels really bad. So the first thing I would do is figure out what your values are and then base your goals on that. Now, once you have the goal, and if you have a bunch of goals, figure out why you're doing them. I have this whole process that I go through because I think goal setting is kind of typical is more of I don't know if people know about the Google OKRs or the goal is write down your goal and then think of all the steps. But in the entrepreneur world, you could do a perfect strategy and then you get to interact with your client and that strategy's gone. I'm just keeping it real, guys.
Joe and I are looking at each other yep, that's accurate.
I think, and I know I'm not giving you a straightforward answer, the one that everybody probably is you set this goal, you do these steps. I like to think of it and be more like a scientist. And what I mean by that is a hypothesis. So, for example, let's say I wanted to write a book. I'm dyslexic. That would be overwhelming for me. But now I'm like, okay, well, that's my journey. Now, what do I want to go about it? So first I'm saying, what do I want this book? Why is it aligned? And what's a bigger purpose? Right? So that gets me kind of moving. The second thing is, who do I know in my network? And do I need to have a group to keep me motivated? Because I know there's a big challenge. So I need to find other people who are good writers and that form a group around them. And then the next thing is like, what's the hypothesis? How can I build habits that move me forward to that I need to do every single day? And that's how I break down my goals. And then I have metrics for that.
Okay. So you just said a group of people to hold you accountable. And I know that that's another thing that you talk about a lot are the value of accountability groups. And so how do you harness these groups? What is like a blueprint for people to follow in terms of getting the most out of them, but also finding them?
So avoid your friends and family because they're going to get you off the hook, right? So let's say, Carly, I know you and all of a sudden you have this goal and then you're like, well, I couldn't do this because my husband went to a U of M game and, it's been crazy and I didn't get it done. And I'm like, oh, I know how important this is to you. And then I get you off the hook, right? It's really hard to hold somebody accountable. So what I like to do is see like, why are we all driven? Find other people who are driven the same way. And they might be total strangers. That's perfect. The next thing is after that, you all agree on the consequence. Now, if the consequence happens a second time, you got to go dive deep and find out, is it that you don't have enough knowledge? Is there a belief system there or is there perfectionism? Right? And then you dive deep in kind of solving it and then holding them accountable. Because no matter how many consequences you do, if you don't go into the root of the problem, you're never going to solve it.
So how have you built your accountability groups? Like how you said, not friends, not family. Can they be strangers? But at the same time, you don't really want to like it's weird because it's a fine line because you want somebody that you can trust, but also not somebody that you
it's love you too. Anyone, right? I agree. So it's funny. I've done accountability groups from all the way from having an IVF. Like I had less than 7% chance of having one kid. I now have 2, so I'm really happy about that. And that was a whole different accountability system. I had to find people in the same kind of circle, and then people who weren't kind of, I didn't want a session where it's like people complaining, right? You have to have a certain vibe and values. Because imagine if Joe, Carly, and I were all in an accountability group and it was like, oh man, I need to get that email out. And it's like every day the same thing. You're just like, I don't want to be your cheerleader. Like you have to have the same level of people. So first thing is, I'm all about values. Go back to your values. Align that. Find places where these people would be or ask people. And if you're going to do a friend, have a friend that doesn't know you so well, right? It's a good friend, but not like one that would be like, get you off the hook. It's really hard to hold somebody accountable.
That is so interesting. So Tanya, you seem to have like processes for how
people have a whole process on these things.
Goals in their personal life and achieve goals in their professional life. And I kind of just want to know more about your business because I feel like this ties into all of that. So can you explain exactly what you do? Because it just seems like this is like a full circle part.
Yeah. So what we do with entrepreneurs is we get them very clear on what they really want to achieve in a quarter. We do it based on quarters. And the goal is to have them grow their business profitably, but also have their time back. Because there's a lot of successful people who don't have life.
Yeah. So with the time back thing, do you have, what were you saying? It was like the focus multiplier or whatever. Like you have something to make people super productive in a short amount of time.
Yes. It's called a focus booster. And it stands for RAP, RAP. So every day, actually write down what you accomplished. Because I know as an entrepreneur, some days I'm kind of like, what the heck did I accomplish? And then I write it down. I'm like, wow, that's a lot I accomplished. Or then sometimes I'm like, this was a day. And then I realize like, wow, most of the stuff I shouldn't be doing. But it's that awareness, right? It's getting you back to that awareness stage. So just write down everything you're doing, no judging. Just write it down. And then you'll kind of get aware and see your patterns. A is for assess. 1 through 5, rate your day. Was it an awesome 5? Then say, yeah, 5 and say why. And the great thing about this is you're going to have data. So you're going to start realizing like all the days that were 5s, there was a pattern, right? Maybe it was like I was on a podcast. Those days are awesome. I love being on a podcast and I did this. And then you could start creating those days. And then P is prioritize. Prioritize the 3 things. Now, here's a catch. I'm sure everyone's heard like, oh, do 3 things only. I would say prioritize 3 things you can get done in 2 hours. That constraint allows you to be really creative and resourceful.
I just want to understand that. So you're saying write down 3 things that you can get done in 2 hours in total or 2 hours each?
2 hours in total.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understand it. So 3 things and you're basically creating urgency. Is that correct?
And having you really think about, is this the only thing I'm able to do, right? What can it, like, let's say you had a project and it was like podcasting and you just need to interview. And some people like do the interview, the editing, do the email, all of that. And now you're like, okay, well, I only have 2 hours. What is the thing that only I can do right now? And then you start delegating quicker. Because I think a lot of people, especially solopreneurs and just people in small businesses, we focus on we're the only ones who can do this, right? And then because you have all this time, you can do it, but you can't last that long. You're going to burn out.
It's funny, Joe, it makes me think we had an event right before this, and there was a part where people were in breakout sessions, so we were just in the waiting room, just us. And Joe didn't realize that I had said that I was focusing on something, and I was in the zone. And it was because I knew that I had 20 minutes to get all these names put into a list of like just frantically typing and everything and getting everything transferred over. But it's because I knew I had that, just that time, because I wanted to get an email sent out after the event and I wanted to make sure everything was ready to go. And I was like, gosh, that was so productive. Just because I put a time limit on myself.
It's called Parkinson's Law.
The task will expand to fill the time allotted. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
true.
like a vacation effect. So right before vacation, you're super productive, right? You're trying to get everything done. Everything's fast, easy. You're just like, oh, I got this deadline, go. And you get it all done.
Yeah. Gosh, Tanya, I feel like you just have so many little tidbits of wisdom and just so many processes to share. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you? Because I feel like there's just so much that we can't really fit into this short interview.
Yeah, I post a lot on LinkedIn, and I can give everybody how to get 10 hours back, the whole detail on how to go about it. And you can just DM me and then put the host. So it could be Joe Carly. So you could say 10 hours back, Joe Carly, and then I'll DM you the framework.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And Tanya, we totally caught you off guard about this offline earlier, but we ask all of our guests this. What is your favorite quote about success?
Oh, it's Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try.
Perfect. You got it. You nailed it.
I have to go and look it in Google.
We're going back and forth. Well, Tanya, I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg for what you could share with our audience. So be sure to check out everything she has to say over on her site. And we just really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, per usual, we love providing this helpful information for you. So if you could leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to the show, whether it's on Apple, YouTube, you name it, wherever you follow our show, we would so appreciate it. But other than that, we will see you next time on The Aspiring Solopreneur.
Bye-bye.